Trained athletes are often told, or come to believe, that supplements work better for beginners and lose their effectiveness as you advance. For many supplements, this is largely true. For creatine, the story is more context-specific and more interesting. The direct phosphocreatine expansion benefit of creatine supplementation does not diminish in trained individuals. Your muscle's maximum creatine storage capacity is determined by muscle mass, not training status. A well-trained athlete with significant muscle mass actually has a larger absolute creatine storage capacity than an untrained individual, which means full saturation represents a larger total creatine reservoir and a proportionally larger phosphocreatine buffer. The performance benefit of filling a larger reservoir is at least as large in absolute terms as filling a smaller one. What does change in trained athletes is their baseline. Well-trained athletes who eat meat and have been supplementing or eating high-creatine diets may already be sitting closer to their creatine ceiling before they start formal supplementation. The gap between baseline and full saturation, the headroom, is smaller. And smaller headroom means a smaller absolute improvement from supplementation. This is not the supplement losing effectiveness. It's the supplement having less room to work with, because the athlete was already closer to optimal than an untrained individual. The implication is significant. Trained athletes who haven't previously supplemented, particularly those on plant-based diets or those who ate little meat, often see surprisingly large responses when they finally start. Their training has expanded their creatine storage capacity without a corresponding increase in intake to fill it. The classic finding in the research: the more muscle you have and the lower your baseline creatine stores, the bigger your response to supplementation. Elite athletes who already eat meat consistently tend to see smaller improvements, but they are not non-responders. They're starting from a more advantageous baseline. The research on creatine in elite athletes shows consistent benefits in sports where explosive effort and repeated sprint demands are central. Elite sprinters, powerlifters, and team sport athletes at the top level consistently show measurable performance improvements with creatine supplementation in well-controlled studies. The magnitude is modest at elite level, 1 to 2% improvements in power output. An extra rep or two on maximal lifts mine, but at competitive elite level, 1 to 2% separates metals from non-places. There's also evidence that trained athletes benefit more from creatine's recovery dimension, particularly the reduction in muscle damage markers and the accelerated phosphocreatine resynthesis between sets. Because elite training actually pushes these systems to their limits, whereas recreational training may not. The more you're already pushing the boundaries of what the phosphocreatine system can deliver, the more valuable it is to have that system operating at full capacity. The baseline difference between trained athletes and their unsupplemented counterparts also helps explain the career-length argument for consistent creatine use. An athlete who has supplemented creatine throughout a 15-year career has accumulated substantially more training volume per session, per year, and over their entire career than an identically talented athlete who hasn't. The performance gap between these hypothetical athletes isn't a gap in pharmacology. It's a gap in training quality compounded across every session for 15 years. The cumulative effect of 1 to 3 extra reps per set, across multiple sets per session, across multiple sessions per week, across 40-plus training weeks per year, across 15 years, is not a small number. It's a fundamentally different career training stimulus. Experienced coaches in strength sports have noted that top-level creatine users, those who have supplemented consistently and trained hard throughout their careers, often display a training age that's effectively higher than their chronological years in the sport. Their muscles have the nuclear content, satellite cell history, and connective tissue adaptation of someone who has done more total training volume than their years in the sport would suggest, because each year was slightly more productive. This is the compounding argument for creatine that extends beyond any individual study's time frame. Explains why experienced athletes who have used creatine consistently are often still performing at high levels at ages when their non-supplementing peers have declined. For trained athletes, creatine is not a beginner's tool. It's the tool most appropriate for anyone whose training is actually intense enough to benefit from a fuller phosphocreatine reservoir.